Welcome to the Decision Lab podcast, the sanctuary for wellness professionals like therapists, coaches, creators, and more who are looking to over-deliver to their clients.
We uncover the truth behind cutting-edge wellness products by going straight to the founder.
We use our backgrounds in neuroscience, chemical engineering, and marketing to ask the hard questions in order to eliminate bias, misinformation, and fancy marketing language.
Allowing you to make better wellness decisions and recommendations for yourself and your clients.
So if you're a leader in the health and wellness space, welcome. This podcast was designed for you.
Join us every week for interviews that will change how you think about wellness.
And we're back. Welcome, everybody, to the Decision Lab podcast, where we help health and wellness professionals, doctors, scientists, coaches, therapists, discover innovative, science-backed products and services for their clients and patients by going straight to the founders of these innovations, cut through the hype, misinformation, and market noise around these kinds of products. Today, we're talking to Sarah Turner, neuroscientist, biohacker, and CEO of Sarah Thrive, LLC. She holds a degree in clinical neuroscience, psychological sciences, and nutritional medicine, and specializes in, bear with me here, photobiomodulation. We're going to talk more about that. And the gut-brain connection. With a background in pharmaceutical research and over a decade of experience, Sarah now co-hosts the Revolutionize podcast, love that name, where she engages with leading experts on cutting-edge health technologies, wellness, and longevity. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Cody. It's lovely to be here and see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. I'm pumped. So we love to start all of our conversations with a little surprise for the founders and people that we talk with, and have a team member or a family member or someone close to the people that we're talking to send in a review of 3 words that remind them of the person we're talking to and 1 impact they've had on their life. So let's listen in here.
Okay, so for Sarah Turner, there are 3 things that come to mind when I think of her that make her very, very special. Number 1, she's extremely kind, very, very kind, warm-hearted person. Number 2, she's very adventurous, extremely adventurous. She's always down for a fun challenge or for, to go on some crazy expedition together and do something fun. And number 3, she has a very young heart. I would say her soul, she's very young. And one way in which she's incredibly impacted my life is she's taught me so much about red light therapy. I still consider her my light G. She's somebody that has inspired me and has taught me everything that I know about light therapy. Go, Sarah.
So tell us about who this was and the impact that they've had on you.
Brilliant. So that's John Graham. So he's the CEO of Lumaflex. He also has a red light therapy company. And we've teamed up recently because it can be a bit lonely kind of going around as startup CEOs. And also he has the same manufacturer. So we find it quite easy to travel around in a group. He's awesome, actually. He's been hugely helpful. And, red light therapy is a fairly kind of young science. And so getting people together and collaborating is the way to go. That I'm very much in favor of collaboration and not competition. And John embodies that. He's always happy to help out. There you see, he's kind of my hype man. He's like that wherever we go, at any of the events, he's also there. He's also kind of cheering me on in the background. So yeah, that was lovely. What a lovely introduction.
Can't agree more. That was great. And I love how he said you have a young heart. That's amazing. What do you think he meant by that?
He meant I'm old. That's what he meant. She's old.
No way.
Up with us. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I am the oldest one in the group. We kind of go around. It's a young team. But yeah, he's right. I'm kind of I'm keeping up with everybody, and I'm always up for it because we're always up to doing some fun things. But yes, that's kind of his way of saying I've got a lot of experience, I think.
He said you're adventurous too. Like, are there any adventures that come to mind that y'all have embarked upon?
We've just done a whole tour. We've just come back started in Phoenix, went to Orlando, went to Miami and New York. So we're kind of just trying to raise the profile of what we're doing. So we were just going event to event to event. So it was quite a tour. So yeah, we've had quite a few adventures on that. We've been staying in Airbnbs together. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of stuff. The last event was Biohacking, which is a big event in New York City. And we had a lot of fun there, and also a huge amount of interest in all of these different cities. Some are spas, some are like fitness centers. One was even a salt conference. You'd be amazed at what people specialize in. So
no
yes,
kidding.
we've called it the Red Light Collective Tour. So we've just finished that a few days ago.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, I'm glad that I'm glad we were able to find him and get a video in. That was awesome. We'll send that to you after as well. So something that intrigues me about all the companies we talk with is the background of the founders. You have a very beautiful scientific background. I'd be curious, what inspired you to become a scientist?
Do you know, I've always just been fascinated with the human body. And, my mum said, I drove her absolutely crazy, even as a young kid with, questions, why isn't all the blood in my boots? How is this working? All of that kind of stuff. And that, I think, I come from England. My dad used to read me Sherlock Holmes is like my nighttime stories, it's kind of detective work. So I think that's a lot of what science is, really. It's kind of a little bit of detective work and trying to work out how things work in an objective way. And I think I took a lot of that on. So throughout my whole schooling, I kind of veered towards studying the sciences. And then, as you said in my little intro, I went into pharmaceutical sciences because it's hugely interesting, like kind of drug interactions and how they're working. But ultimately, I've found that from a point of view of human health, unsatisfying, but it's certainly a fascinating topic to study.
Yeah, no kidding. I like it. The thing that interests me, there's so many things that interest me, but you've got a psychological background, you've got neuroscience background, and you've got nutritional medicine background as well. How have these three disciplines interacted, and how do you look at health in the human body from these lenses differently than someone else might?
Yeah, well, that kind of came about from my trajectory. So I started off with biology and chemistry, and that's what got me to pharmaceuticals. And then in the pharmaceutical industry, they kind of put me on a task force, like going around problem solving. And one of the main issues that they had, I was working at GlaxoSmithKline, was that the inhaled drugs, so the asthma drugs, were having weird effects, like they would work in some people and not others. And so they got me on a task force looking at it. And we discovered it was the plastic delivery, because if you are have a lot of static in your own body, then the drug deposits in a different way inside the lungs. And so what I found out from my research is if you're grounded, and I did this like with fake lungs and all kinds of experiments, but if you ground yourself and you remove the charge, the actual delivery of the drug works a lot better because your lungs are working more efficiently. And so really the solution to the problem is to stand outside the ground. That's the solution to the problem there. But of course, it's a drug company. That's not the solution they wanted. And eventually we worked out how to change the plastic. But that's what got me thinking of a more person-centered view of health. So that's how I went from doing biology and chemistry to studying nutrition, because I thought, okay, it's about the health of the person. That's what's affecting how even the drugs are working. But after doing nutrition for a while, even that's a little bit limiting because it is also to do with your mindset. So that's why I went on and did the neuroscience, because it kind of led on from, nutrition is interesting, but it's certainly not the full picture. You need to have the brain aspect. So that's how it comes. I've got that kind of weird mix of like biology, chemistry, psychology, then the nutrition, and then the neuroscience. I kind of followed down that path. And then I went kind of what I call fairly deep woo-woo, kind of right over the other side, looking at things like focused intention and consciousness studies, which again is very, very interesting, but I'm kind of bringing it back now to something that's a bit more objective and measurable, because then I can have a bigger impact, because then you can actually deliver something that it can be more evidence-based. Although,
Right.
I kind of have half a mind every now and then I go off to do my slightly woo-woo things, because there's definitely something going on there. And consciousness is a huge puzzle that's kind of fascinating to think about, but from the point of view of science and actually delivering usable products and systems, I've kind of come a bit more over into the kind of physics biology side again with the light therapy.
It's wild. Consciousness is one of my favorite topics as well. I would love, and we do woo-woo here all the time. So I would love to know a little bit about this foray into woo-woo. Like what? Focused intention doesn't sound that woo-woo to me. That sounds like there's a lab in Stanford that studies that kind of stuff. So what?
Yeah, and to be honest, you're right. There's a lot of like the original research looking at things like focused intention was from Princeton. So it's not like these are kind of people pottering around, with Julian sandals. It's not like that at all. These are very serious scientists. But at the moment, we don't have an objective measure for some of these things. And it's even difficult to duplicate the results because, of course, you can't factor out the effect of the person. So the current scientific method that we have for measuring is not really applicable for some of these consciousness studies. So that's why I think it's very difficult, because it doesn't fit into the current paradigm, because we're still not quite integrating all these findings from quantum physics where you have an observer effect. And so then how do you measure it when you can't factor out that there is someone actually measuring it? So I'm totally into it. It's just very difficult, to measure it. But there are people who are working on the quantum biology angle, And that, again, is a very serious science that's now, Surrey University in England is a base for that. So I try and keep up with that and kind of neural correlates of consciousness and how that might be actually a quantum process. Again, people are looking at it. We're just not quite there. So Arizona State University is another brilliant place for that. They have a whole center for consciousness studies where they are focusing on very real and tangible effects like neural correlates, microtubules, all kinds of things in the brain.
Like Penrose, like all, yes. Oh my God. I love this kind of stuff. Like this is awesome. What caused you to kind of, you said that you took a dive into some of the woo-woo stuff. What led to the dive?
I think I came to California. I moved from England to California in Santa Cruz, where funnily enough I am now just by coincidence, but there was a lot of stuff happening where people were starting to reinvestigate some of those findings that, like I say, it was really Princeton in the 1950s. So it's not new, but people were starting to apply it, looking to see if you could imprint onto water, looking to see if you could influence random event generators in computers. So I was doing that for a while and then looking at the potential applications of that. I was kind of in that place for a fairly long time. I sort of was involved in a few media projects, talking about it, interviewing a few people who were involved in that, like Luc Montagnier, who actually is a Nobel Prize winner for identifying how HIV is linked to AIDS. But he did a whole other thing looking at how you could potentially imprint onto water. So I went and interviewed him doing that while I was here in California. So that's really how I went. But like I say, after a while, I started looking more at light, because light is also a quantum process, and I was looking at light from this way of, could light help some kind of imprinting onto water? Because as you probably know, I don't know if you've read the book Fourth Phase Water that talks about how light restructures water.
I haven't read it yet.
You haven't read it
Give me
yet.
a little bit of the spark notes.
Yeah, put that in your show notes, because it's a fascinating book, and it's an entry level. It's written for the layman, and Fourth Phase Water by Professor Jerry Pollack. But what he's basically saying in that is that light will structure water. If it's next to a hydrophilic, that just means water-loving surface, like a membrane, for example, in a cell. So you can actually change the structure of water if you shine light on it, specifically red and near-infrared. Near-infrared has the most structuring effect. And this has huge implications for biology. And at the time while I was here, I actually visited Jerry Pollack's lab, and I looked at the experiments that he was doing. And water is H2O. But if you shine light on it, it actually changes the structure, and it becomes more like H3O2 because of the bonding. It forms like a lattice structure, because, like water seems different to ice, because ice is just bonded differently. It's kind of bonded in a lattice, and then you have these hard hydrogen bonds in between. Well, if you shine light onto water in the body or next to a membrane, you also form this lattice structure, but without the bonding in between. So it becomes slippery. So this is probably one of the ways in which the body is utilizing light to increase efficacy and energy consumption inside the body. So
wow.
Originally, I was looking at how could I potentially structure water to make water more bioavailable for people. And then I thought, well, I have a neuroscience background. The brain is mostly water. Surely we can just shine light straight onto the brain, cut out the middleman and have an effect on the body just by using light. And I really think you can, and this is part of my motivation for using light therapy devices like focused on the brain or focused on the gut, is to actually influence how water is performing or being structured in order to increase efficacy of biology.
Wow, that's amazing. And so that's a perfect segue into the company you started. It sounds like based on this research, I'm guessing that's where your passion for your company came from. Is that true?
That's right. Because I was thinking, okay, maybe we can structure the brain with water, with light. And then I was kind of Googling, has anybody thought of this before? And of course, it wasn't an original thought. Of course, there's a whole load of people that are already there before me doing it. And so I found out that there was a study actually ongoing, Baylor, Scott and White at Texas. And because I have a research background, I was able to say, can I just volunteer to do some data collection, because I wanted to see, is this actually working? And so I went to Philadelphia, and they were doing experiments using big helmets that you put on your head with near-infrared light. And they were doing people with fairly advanced Parkinson's disease to see whether you could affect Parkinson's. So I got myself over there, and I was doing data collection we were doing things like reaction times, how quickly can you tap a certain number when it comes up, gait analysis, blood biomarkers. And I was there for 3 months and I was doing active and sham. It was placebo controlled because that wavelength of light is invisible. So as long as the fans are humming, you don't know whether the lights are on or not. But I really saw which ones were active. I mean, it was very obvious because half of the group were changing. They were getting their personality back. They were able to walk in by themselves. They were doing their own cardigans up as they left, whereas the others were still very much. And so that was the turning point for me, because I was like, this is actually changing symptoms of this disease that we've been told that there's absolutely no cure for. And like I say, sometimes it wasn't pretty. Sometimes people were quite angry because all of a sudden, they were having to take care of themselves and they were used to being taken care of. So there was a bit of resistance. So, it wasn't all like flowery or like, I'm getting better, isn't it great? For a lot of people, it's like, well, I'm used to being dressed in, why aren't you helping me get dressed? Kind of that resistance. And it's like, well, because you can do it yourself now. So, that's also a very interesting thing that I was thinking about. Yeah, okay, with healing comes some responsibility.
Yeah.
But aside of that, and aside of, lots of arguments aroused, which, the husbands and wives are like, oh my God, I had an row last night. Isn't it amazing? This person who I've been living with who's kind of been a little bit non-responsive actually had an opinion about something and was well enough to express it. So that's where I thought,
that's impactful.
Amazing. And I thought this medicine has to get out there. We should know about light therapy, but the device was big, right? Because it was a clinic, like a research device. It was heavy. I'm putting it on these little old ladies and they're kind of sinking down in their seats because it's a big, heavy unit. And so I thought this can be easy. This could just be like a little band with a battery, and it doesn't need to be this big unit. We just need to get light to the brain. And so then I kind of made in my mind this design for a headband, and I took it around to various people. And in the end, I found a Dutch company who were also as excited as I was. And they're like, yeah, we can make it, Sarah, but then you have to head the company, because we have to know how to sell it. So my motivation was just to get a few of these devices made for me and for people that I was speaking to. The intention wasn't to start this company as such, but that's kind of where it led, because once you've got the device made, then of course you need to get it out into the world. So that's kind of where I'm at. It's been like a 3-year journey to get to the point where I have product now. So really it's fairly new. I think I only got full stock like a month ago.
Right. I remember when we first talked, you didn't have any either. I'm curious, there's a couple steps that we've taken here. First of all, Pittsburgh, love Pittsburgh. It's like the neuroscience mecca of the United States. I love that. Especially a lot of my research on brain science has been like concussion research. So a lot of stuff happens there. So go Pittsburgh. I'm curious.
Pittsburgh, but I'm sure that's a really
Philadelphia, my bad. Sorry. Yeah. In relation to the mechanism of action, I'm curious if there's any research or hypothesis or thought processes, or because people, like, let's just be honest, like the average consumer hears light is restructuring water and it affects your brain and it cures Parkinson's. A lot of the times people are like, no, that's too good to be true. We just interviewed somebody who does hyperbarics and how it can help with brain damage and things like that. And it takes kids who have brain damage and literally were being unplugged and about to die in recovery. And now they're 2 years old, speaking, walking, talking, doing all the stuff. Those types of stories are awesome, and I'm here for them, but they also seem a little bit like, this seems hyperbolic. Is there any science behind this? So scientists, can you tell us a little bit more about like what might be happening here? Like even if you don't know exactly, like how does this work?
Well, there is actually a lot of published research on mechanisms of red light therapy. And there are a few theories. Mainly the main theory focuses on the mitochondria in the cell. So the mitochondria is a small organelle within the cell, and it's how the body produces energy. So the body produces energy in the form of a molecule, and then that molecule is used however we want to make energy. It's called ATP. And so the main mechanism of action that's documented at the moment is that light comes into the mitochondria in the cell, and it goes into what's called the electron transport chain, and that's just the way that the body makes this energy molecule, and it causes the body to make a lot more energy. And at the same time, it has a transient release of nitric oxide gas, which causes the blood vessels to dilate. So all of a sudden, you have a lot more energy and you have greater blood flow to the area. So that's a whole lot there of a mechanism that's a good enough explanation on its own.
Right. That's
the way we
wild.
like to explain it to people who are a bit, like you say, it is a bit out there that you're just shining light to have these effects, is we really need to go back to what humans actually are. Humans are diurnal mammals. We are mammals that have evolved in conjunction with our planet, which has a day and nighttime cycle. And we have a sun that comes up at a certain angle on the Earth and delivers us these long wave red and near infrared wavelengths of light. Then we have more UV, and then we have long wave red and infrared light again. So our bodies are totally and utterly adapted to this cycle. If we don't see sunrise and sunset, we are deficient in those wavelengths of light. So really a lot of what is going on is just correcting this deficiency in long wave light, because all of these, we can talk all day about all these very granular mechanisms of action. And actually that's probably what's happening. Light causes this production of energy so that mammals have the energy to go out and do daytime things that mammals do, mating and hunting and looking for carbohydrates, all those good things. And then at nighttime, we have that cue to rest and rejuvenate and sleep. So that's really, I think, how we can understand more about the importance of light and how we're missing out so much by living these indoor lives and not seeing those cues at sunrise and sunset. So
That's interesting.
why it's so important. And yes, there are lots of mechanisms. I've told you I think structured water is a mechanism. I think charging the mitochondria is a mechanism. I think there are probably a lot more mechanisms that we will find out more when we incorporate more of quantum biology. A lot of molecules in the body will resonate with light and have an effect. In fact, anything with like an aromatic structure, like a ring structure, which is a lot of our molecules in our body, will resonate with light to a certain degree. So yes, there are a lot of mechanisms. It's very well documented. Like I say, there's probably 3,000 plus published peer-reviewed papers on this on PubMed.
100%. Yeah. And I've looked at them. I just wanted, from the horse's mouth, it's great to hear someone explain it simply for consumers and stuff. Another question I have is, in the research that you were talking, they had these gigantic caps, these like industrial grade lights and things like that. How do you make sure that the band that you use, and I don't know, we could put a visual on the screen of like what the band looks like and stuff. How does that equate to the industrial strength or like the huge giant thing that was happening in the lab? And how do you know, as someone who's putting these out into the world, that those correlate with one another as far as the effect that they could potentially have?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And, at the moment, it's still very difficult to measure the light, like the dose of light. Because what we can do, though, is we can measure what we're putting out. It's difficult to measure what's going in. I mean, people have done it with cadavers and people have done it with, animal studies. And so we have an idea of the light that's actually penetrating and going in. And actually, the body's very transparent to near infrared light. It goes straight through bone. It will get right into the organs. But we know what we're putting out. So we can measure it in milliwatts per centimetre squared is usually what we measure the output. So when we're comparing devices, that's the main thing we look at. Is the power output similar or comparable? And then also for that kind of power output, obviously it depends on the time that you use it. It's like baking a cake. You can set it to 200, but how long are you baking it for, So, so the dose is the power output plus the time. So usually that comes to a measurement, which is joules. So for all the research that we've got on, certainly brain red light therapy, it's in between 3 joules per centimetre squared and 100 joules per centimetre squared, depending on the device and what you're trying to do. So my device is 30, it's somewhere in the middle of that. I've tried to make sure that the milliwatts is a similar output. And really, it's just kind of what effect does it have? If it has an effect, then something's happening. So at the moment, I am seeing a good effect. I also, with my device, because it's difficult to get light really through everything that's going on with the head actually onto the brain, you probably only get about 1 to 3% of the light that you're putting out actually onto the surface of the brain.
Wow.
I incorporate a gut pad because obviously the gut and the brain are so intricately connected, and also it's easier to get the red light through soft tissue. And you can irradiate the blood, the vagus nerve, the gut. You can heal the membranes of the gut. So as kind of like an insurance that I'm really maximizing the light you're getting to the head, I also use another site. But yes, at the moment, we don't have a specification to say you need exactly this amount of light. And the other thing to remember is everyone is different. An older person is going to different water composition in the body, maybe thicker skull, maybe people have got different conductivity. Actually, skin tone may have an effect of the light that's going in. So at the moment, we don't have a standardized dosage for people. It just really depends on a lot of factors. But I think we all in the industry have kind of decided on, okay, this is at least the output that you need and it's equivalent. And then, all we can do is just keep testing and seeing where we get the effect.
So I know biohacking is a big thing, big part of you. Was red light the first foray into biohacking, or have there been other cool things that you've done in the biohacking space?
Yes, I think I focus mainly on that aspect of biohacking, certainly the light aspect, whether it's using red light therapy or whether it's, kind of circadian biology and, grounding. I kind of come from the school of biohacking, which is more about just living as close as you can to nature. I think sometimes, you can have biohacking, which is all about gadgets, which is great, but also the best biohacks are the ones, that just stand outside on the grass. That's something that I tell people all the time, and they're like, what? That's your advice? Stand outside on the grass. But those kinds of biohacks, I think, are the more important ones. Be out in nature, have a lot of good fun friends. So I'm into the biohacking, but I tend to be a little bit kind of slow tech, mimic nature as much as you can. And I think that's really what biohacking is all about. How can you adjust your environment to be a little bit more like the kind of animals that we are, that are kind of meant to be living that we've kind of evolved in bodies which are more adapted to be living outside. So how can we modulate our environment to mimic that a bit more? And most of it is very simple. Most of it is just be outside more.
Right. That's interesting. So what were some of the challenges? It's interesting, two things, that that's your perspective on biohacking. That's so cool, because every other biohacker is like, oh, this gadget and that gadget and this hyperbaric thing and all this, like this supplement and NAD plus, all the stuff, intravenous, whatever. So it's really cool to hear that you're like there is a wave of biohackers that are kind of like naturalistic in a way, or like, let's get back to being natural. I'd love to hear that. Yeah, you created a technology.
Yes.
So what, if your belief is more natural, help me understand you have to be super passionate about this technology specifically if your belief is we got to be more natural. So what's the gap there?
Well, really, if I could say to people, okay, this is it. Everyone's got to be living outside, try and sleep on the ground, try and get up with sunrise and sunset. That's a difficult sell. And actually, we don't live lives like that. We just don't. I mean, if I could go around to all the old people's homes and say, right, this is what you've got to do, wheel everybody out at sunrise, but for a lot of times it's just not practical for a lot of people. So we have to meet people where they are, and we have to use the tools that we've got when we need to. I mean, I would say to people, do both, if you can, if it's available to them, if you're running an old person's home and it's okay, you could try and round up everybody and get them outside and see the sunrise, great. If not, you still do need to replace those wavelengths of light that we're missing. So things like try and make sure everyone's got a window, try and make sure you're at least seeing sunlight. If you can't get outside, stick your head out the window, whatever you need to do, but utilize these technologies. And there are ways that we can also enhance the technology. So it's not just like in this headband, I can also entrain brainwaves by pulsing those light frequencies.
Wow.
You can kind of deliver the light in a way where you're enhancing the effect that you would get. So certainly for a lot of things like neurodegeneration, there is now evidence that if you kind of show the body like a 40 hertz frequency, or if you pulse light or sound at 40 hertz, you can entrain the brain to come back up to that frequency, and that can have a positive healing effect. So I think there are things you can do to enhance that red light effect. Yeah, I am totally down for the natural thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm just looking over there. I have got a suitcase full of all different supplements and all different things. I'm trying to do all the things, but my basics are very simple. It's just try and maximize natural light and have fun. I think a lot of biohacking sometimes can be a bit serious. And actually, from my own heart rate variability, which of course I track all the time, when I'm around my friends, that's when it goes up. It's not when I'm kind of eating the latest kind of protein bar or when I'm doing it's when I'm having fun and being outside. So I think you're right. It's difficult to integrate these technologies in a way that totally respects nature, because we are still using, in effect, this is an artificial light, but trying to do it in a way where we encourage people to respect their circadian biology, but you can deliver a very good dose of light. I mean, some people are very sensitive to UV, for example. You can deliver a good dose of red light without any of the other wavelengths. You know exactly you're getting the dose a day. You can pulse the light to have an effect. So I try to use both. I don't use many technologies that go against nature, but I think red light is so similar to what we're getting outside. It's so recognizable by the body.
Wow. It's an adaptation. That's cool. I
Yeah.
like that. So who is your guys' ideal client? Like who is it that you think would benefit best from being able to use your device?
Yeah, so because it's affecting really like your body's basic metabolism and energy function, it's difficult not to say, everybody. And one caveat I will say here is at the moment, the FDA don't have a classification for red light for a brain health condition. So from a kind of legal standpoint, and that's not just my company, that's any company that's doing is you have to go from a baseline of where someone's at to better. So better performance, better sleep, better memory. That being said, I personally have seen in research trials anyway, neurodegeneration, TBI, even things like ALS, really people get a huge benefit from using these devices. And actually the kind of more depleted you are, the more effect you get because you can very easily stimulate the mitochondria. But as you said, I spent a long time with biohackers, and biohackers are all about getting the edge performance.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, I think increasing cognitive capacity is a huge one. If you are thinking straight, you can handle everything so much better, So that piece for me is huge. And that personally is my own motivation. Also, I have a genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's. I've done my genetic profile. So prevention is another huge one. Everybody wants to talk about longevity, but there's no point having longevity if you haven't got a healthy brain.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
We don't want another 20 years of dementia. You want to have another 20 years of a good brain, healthy life.
Yeah. Health
So,
span.
yeah. And then also because I have the gut panel and the gut is linked to the brain, things like IBS, IBD, leaky gut, I also focus on those because I think really a lot of brain health is stemming from bad gut health. People don't realize how much of their brain symptoms are linked to what's going on with their gut. So things like IBS responds very quickly because you can get a lot of light to the gut. And then all of a sudden, these brain symptoms magically disappear because a lot of it is caused by the gut. So I tend to focus on both, focus on kind of getting a healthy brain, but at the same time, improving the integrity of your gut.
It's interesting. What is your perspective on the psychological side of this? You have a psychological background a little bit as well. Like if some of these things are coming from, like I work a lot with people with trauma and I study trauma a lot and how that affects the mind, brain, and body. If someone has some past trauma in their psychology, in their mind, if you will, if we want to just separate the mind, brain, and body just for a second, and that continues to be there, will it not continue to put the stress or the like IBS or whatever on the body? And then you just continuously need the light therapy? Or do you see them working, like solving those two problems tangentially? Or like, how do you think about that? Like solving the root cause?
Well, I think it is impossible to separate out the psychological and the physical. It's all having an effect. If you've got a lot of neuroinflammation, you're going to be stressed out. So instantly, if you remove inflammation in the body, specifically neuroinflammation, then some of those stress symptoms you're able to handle better because you're handling things better. You're able to make new pathways in the brain. So I think having a healthy body is the key to having better psychology, really. And things like the gut, that's where the gut comes in. I mean, that's where we get a lot of our inflammation from. If people have leaky gut, they have metabolites going into their blood, going into their brain. I mean, some of the metabolites from bacteria can penetrate the gut-brain barrier. And then, these kind of feelings that you're attributing actually to psychological, a lot of that could be physical. Things like panic attacks, often attributed to, actually what's going on is, the gut's unhappy, you're getting metabolites in the brain is freaking out. From my point of view, really healing the gut and focusing on that is one of the most important things. And then, as I said to you, the brain can get stuck in pathways. So one way to do it could be to force the light on the brain so that you're training the brain into a different frequency. And doing that consistent basis can help get people out of those kind of repetitive states, or when people, their default mode network is kind of, doing something weird and you're not able to focus or to break out of a repetitive thought. So there are people looking at that. There's a guy called Paolo Cassano, and he's a psychiatrist, and he's currently got a whole research lab where he's doing just that. He's using red light therapy transcranially for psychiatric disorders to great effect.
Wow. It's wild.
Yeah.
some of the most basic stuff. When I was studying brain science, it was like brand new research coming out around optogenetics. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff, but like how they could change the genetics of certain nerve cells in rats, and certain light frequencies could activate and fire specific sets of neurons and stuff. So it's just wild to see like red light therapy and all these things coming out after having like that specific of research. Like we could literally shine light on rat brains and cause certain things to happen. Like to me, when I hear this stuff, I'm like, oh, like this is not that big of a leap. Like
Yeah.
to me, but I can understand how the average consumer would be like, oh, this is kind of
I think it's
kind of wild.
I think it's wild because it's kind of like, it seems a bit like a panacea, and it seems a bit too good to be true that you can just shine light onto your brain. You know, it's painless, it's, you know, it's relatively inexpensive, and, you know, you don't have to take a drug or anything, and you have these effects. But I think that's when you have to wrap your mind around, okay, how is the brain actually working? You know, and it probably is getting cues from the environment in order to switch on and off genes, like you said. Like you're getting that long wave light at a sunset, your body is probably switching on those genes. It's like, oh yeah, it's sunset. That means it's time for me to heal and repair. And if you don't see that, you don't switch on those genes. So really, that's why it's getting your head into, okay, this is how the body wants to work. That's when it becomes a little bit more intuitive and less, you know, kind of mysterious.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Something, and not everybody has this because it's millions of dollars to do clinical research and stuff, but has there been any specific research you've done with your device specifically, or even you have whole teams of biohackers doing this stuff and you guys measure your data wildly? Like, has there been any research or anecdotal research, even like, or data collection on your device, the effects that it has, or anything like that?
There's not been a whole lot of research on biohackers and on a major scale. I mean, what I'm doing is I've joined up with a company called Heads Up, and they have this cool platform where it will pull in any wearable. So anyone who now has my headband, I invite them onto a Heads Up platform, and then I can pull in their wearable data, and my app tracks when they do the red light, and then the data is just pulled in constantly. So the idea is, over, like, you know, if I could build up enough people, you can look for trends in that data.
Wow. Okay. That's freaking amazing.
Yeah, that's a cool thing to do, especially things like heart rate, sleep scores. And then I have like questionnaires where people can fill in general wellness, very simple metrics so that it doesn't get too complicated. But yeah, people are starting to do that and look at it. Like I say, that Paolo Casano is also doing studies where he is also monitoring people for things like cognitive abilities using, you know, all the usual cognitive questionnaires. A lot of people are using questionnaires and kind of getting some very good data. But at the moment, things like the trackers haven't quite made it into orthodox research. And funny enough, I raised this. I was at a big event in London a few weeks ago, and it's like, why are we just leaving all this on the table? It's kind of some kind of academic snobbery that they won't use these tools because they've not been validated to a certain degree. There's so much information.
Right.
I'm into it. It's kind of like citizen science, but it just needs for people to start to bring it in a bit more. But yeah, there are companies, like I say, the Heads Up that I'm working with, they're starting to work with other companies to do exactly that, provide a portal where you can bring in all the data and then plot out the results and look for trends in the data. Maybe the AI, you know, we're kind of hearing this about AI. I just think, God, if we could plug in all the experiments, the failed ones, you know, and find trends, I think a whole lot of data is going to come out of that.
Yeah, I am very, very much excited for that. So that's cool. So not a ton yet specifically, but on the path. I'd love to hear that when people are like trying to validate their things in general. So that's awesome. Something else I'm curious about is, how does CR Thrive compare to things that are already on the market? Like, is it better than a red light panel? Is it better than a red light sauna? Is it better? Like, how does it compare? Where does it fit in on into all these different red light devices and systems?
Yeah, I think if you're trying to get light actually onto the surface of the brain, you have to have a device that fits flush onto the head. And I think most people are agreed with that. Like I say, even with one that fits flush to the head, you're still only getting between 1% and 3% of the light passing through, because you've got to get through connective tissue, the bone, you know, water is absorbing light. You've got all kinds of things going on there. So there are quite a few brain devices, but you're not going to get there with a panel. And also light will only go in a straight line. So if you imagine that you need to have the angle of penetration has to be correct. So it has to be constant to the body. If you're standing in front of a panel and you're glowing red, it's because the light is bouncing off you. It's not going in, you know? So
Note to self.
it's all going off. You're losing a lot of the light. You're losing so much that you're not going to penetrate. So that's why I have a contoured headband, and most of the other competitors are people like V-Light. They also have something that sits flush to the head. So you do need that. And
so there's a method to the madness. That makes sense.
There's method to the madness, and also hair is a barrier. And maybe, you and I are kind of fair, not a lot of hair, but, if you had someone with an afro or someone with very thick hair, you're going to get different amounts of light going in because the hair is going to scatter the light and to some extent absorb it. So I try and just go in through here, through the frontal cortex, where kind of all the action in the brain is going on anyway. So that is another consideration. Hair is a barrier, or at least
is there ways that you're working on trying to get a higher percentage of light? Like if you went from 30 to 70, would that get a higher percentage of light to hit the brain, or is that just a maximal number? Or
well, potentially you could, but again, we don't know what the maximum dose is. This kind of fairly small amount of light is having quite dramatic effects. And if you look at quantum biology and how it works, the body is trying to use energy in the most efficient way. It's not always more is better in biology. In biology and how photosynthesis works, you need small amounts of energy to activate these cascades. So potentially, the brain is utilizing these small amounts of energy in a very efficacious way that you only need a small amount. You can overdo it. There is a biphasic response, certainly in a cell. So if you do a study of cells in Petri dishes, you see this biphasic response in that too little light doesn't really do anything, but too much light can have a negative effect because then cells start to work so fast and generate so much waste products that the body becomes toxic.
That is interesting.
But you don't want to overdo it. And at the moment, we don't know what too much is. So
you don't know what it is.
The body is amazing. The body is amazing because we're somehow having an effect on Parkinson's, and yet Parkinson's disease, as far as we've worked out, is right deep in the brain. It's affecting the substantia nigra. We know the light isn't getting there, but somehow people are getting better. So somehow the light is having an effect which isn't directly related to the target site anyway.
Perhaps. Sounds like some network neuroscience.
Things going on, and we also know that when you shine light onto the body, the body is producing light. This is this whole concept of biophotons. The body is producing light by itself anyway. So perhaps you have an effect, you shine light onto the brain and then those cells produce light and it reflects down and down into the brain. Perhaps neurons as waveguides, or maybe the microtubules could be waveguides. So I think the aim is not to kind of always get more. The aim is to kind of work out with the intricate balance on what the brain is doing with the light that it's got. So I don't necessarily think more is better. I think we just need to understand better how the brain wants to receive that light.
Wow, that's amazing. Speaking of energy, what about like EMF, ionizing radiation, things like that? Putting something this powerful just like directly on your forehead. People freak out about AirPods. Will you ever get that question, or like what's your thought on those things?
Well, I do, and I also freak out a little bit about AirPods. So I've double shielded the battery, so there's no EMF leakage. The only EMF that's going in is the light EMF, which is the healing one. I do control the device with an app via Bluetooth, but I have a disable switch. So you set your program and then you can disable the Bluetooth so that you don't have you have a kind of minimum non-native EMFs going on. But if you was to put a meter up to the battery, there's nothing coming out of that. So that was one of the specifications. And the engineers were like, oh God, who is this tin hatter woman that wants to they're like, why would you turn the Bluetooth off? And I'm like, well, we potentially, it could, here I am sitting bathed in all the Wi-Fi, maybe it's academic, but I do try and limit those kinds of exposures to a device that goes on the head.
Got it. That's so good to hear. I was curious about that. I love that. I appreciate you sharing all this stuff. Something that I'm always curious on, especially someone who's so academic and science-backed as you are, how do you think about science communication and marketing this and selling this? And like, how do you balance like communicating the hard science, but with also like the general public? And you can't say like parasympathetic nervous system or vagus nerve probably in the general way. You have to kind of dumb it down a little bit and make it simpler. Like, how do you balance the business side with the science side?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And like I say, whenever it was, I was in England, probably like 3 weeks ago, I was at PBM24, which is the big academic conference. And it's very academic, and people will not come at, because I think people think if they start talking in kind of language or slang language, it makes it less scientific. And so very dense papers, which, like you say, all medical words, totally like just someone reading off a sheet, absolutely no imagery, maybe a graph, something complex. Wow. And it's very difficult then to translate that into something palatable for people. So, I try as much as I can to put it into different language. I go to a lot of events so you can explain to people. I do reels, where I'm just talking about it. Yeah. But I've seen there are a lot of different companies that are doing it that I'm trying to learn from a little bit, because I do tend to be a little bit dry and scientific myself. So what did I watch the other day? It was a good show on Netflix where they're talking about the gut. Maybe you've seen it. They have like little felt rodents that do the talking.
No, I haven't seen it yet. I'm definitely going to watch it.
Hack Your Gut or something like that, it was called. But they kind of did it in a way that I thought, oh no, this is too simplistic. But actually, look, when I kind of thought about it, it helps people because you're kind of delivering it in a way which is more entertaining. Because nobody really wants to sit and listen to a lecture on what is a mitochondria. I've learned painfully after doing it many times. So you do have to kind of think about language that helps people understand. And so that's why I tend to focus more on sort of telling to people, okay, this is how humans are evolved and this is how we're meant to live. Because I think that's an easier message than trying to get people to kind of go back and visit their biology and talk about the Krebs cycle or oxidative phosphorylation. It's kind of people switch off. Yeah. So I think people can kind of meet, if you kind of talk about things very simply and talk, okay, we're animals, we need to see sunrise and sunset, that's red light. You can start from there. And then as people want to learn more, you can go right the way up to really getting into the mitochondria. But yeah, it's definitely a difficult one. And I don't think I've mastered it yet, because like I say, a lot of my communications are perhaps a little bit more on the boring science side when I need to bring it a little bit more to, something that's a bit more relatable.
Fair enough. Speaking of science and business, what's been the biggest roadblocks, challenges, the hardest part about going from scientist, research and all that into business?
Yeah, God, it's a massive learning curve. I mean, it's not just kind of making a product and then selling it. There is so much more to the business piece, and it's a whole nother language, Yeah. And I've been very fortunate in my business partners, and because my business partners are my manufacturer, and I'm very fortunate that they've funded the development up to this point. So I haven't had to kind of go into that crazy world of pitching and investment and all that, which I may have to soon, which, is rather daunting. But even there's just so many regulations and logistics and things you have to navigate. I mean, it's quite incredible. It's very difficult, actually. It makes you wonder how small businesses do it, because it's almost prohibitive, the amount of work that you have to do just to sell something, just to sell one thing. The regulation, even like the customs and all the different countries. So like I say, it's one of the things you say, would you have done it if you'd have known all the work? I'm like, oh, I don't know. But once you get into the flow of it, people are generally very helpful. It just is a lot of work, and it's a big learning curve for sure.
That's beautiful. So speaking of which, something business people have to do is project into the future. So what's the future for Sierra? I know you just started, you just got some product stuff, but what's in the future, or is there anything on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
Well, always to try and improve the product with the new learnings. So, now I've got to the stage where enough people are using the device. Like I said to you, I'm gathering the data with this platform and really trying to work out which people can I help the most. And really, I just want to get it into the hands of people who need it, because there are so many people who could benefit from this, even if they do it in conjunction with what they're doing now. This isn't a therapy where you have to drop everything. But I have seen some quite amazing stories. And really, for me, just to get that out there in the hands of those people, it's my aim, and the more people in the hands I can get it in, the better. So that's kind of my goal. And I would like to, my long term, like they call it your big audacious goal or whatever, is get medical approval. Because at the moment, nobody has medical approval for this. And really, it's a bit of a crime that something that works and potentially, could work for neurodegeneration, which, let's face it, is a massive global problem.
Yeah.
And yet it's not recognised as a medical device. So that's my big goal. And like I say, it's quite audacious, because that's probably a lot of fundraising to get there and a lot of work. But that would be nice to have it where doctors can actually prescribe it and you don't have to kind of shadily say, oh, well, it might help with memory. You can actually say, no, this device will help you with X condition. That's what I'm kind of having up there as my guiding star.
That's beautiful. I love that. So is that, in your opinion, kind of the future of health tech, is getting medical approval? And is that kind of where you see your place into this?
I think that's where we're at right now. I mean, it would be nice, if we kind of could break free of this kind of system that we have so that people are free to make your own choices and you can buy and sell what you like. But at the moment, within the constraints of the system, that's definitely where I think I can make the biggest impact.
I love to hear that. Cool. So as we're kind of bringing in for a landing here, we have some signature questions we like to ask at the end. One is left from the guest, our previous guest. So we always ask guests to leave the next guest a question. So we'll get to that in a second. But the first question we ask is, what is something that you wish people asked you more often? Like, what's a question you wish you were asked more?
I wish that people would ask me a little bit more kind of what they can do to be a little bit more holistic about their wellness, because people always are fixated on their condition. So I don't know how many emails I get a day saying, I've got X, will this work for me? I've got Alzheimer's, I've got Parkinson's, I've had a stroke. Will this work? Almost like a prescriptive thing. And really it's about, how you can raise your kind of vibe and your general health and wellness in a holistic is what I would rather hear, instead of it's always like, give me a protocol that will work for this. Because people, I think we're very much stuck in this kind of medical model where somebody wants a prescription for one thing.
Yeah. So let's pretend I asked you that. Let's pretend I was like, what's a holistic way that I can raise my vibe and improve my health? What would you say to me?
I would say, let's look at you. Let's look at your whole day. Let's look at how are you waking up? Are you sticking your head out the window? Are you going outside before you turn the light on? Are you not looking at your screens? Are you overwhelmed with email? Have you got a good relationship with your significant other? Have you got an animal? Are you doing everything you can do to make your life fun and enjoyable? Are you eating well? Are you eating locally? These are all very simple things that people can do that don't really cost very much and can totally radically change people's health. It's like going, did you get outside for a walk today?
Mm-hmm.
They're the kinds of, I think, that will, did you sleep well? Did you go to bed before 10 o'clock? Did you watch some horrible crime thing, late at night before you went to bed? These are all things I think that would drastically change people's health, but people don't really want to talk about it because they want a medicine. Okay, don't tell me I don't want to change my relationship. I just want to put this red light on for 10 minutes and everything's good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that. I work a lot in the mental health space, as you know, and the first 6 things that I focus on are sleep, exercise, nutrition, social connection, play, and stress reduction.
Right.
And people are always like, well, you my PE teacher? I thought you were supposed to be like a therapist. What's going on? And I was like, dude, your mind, brain, and body are inseparable. Your body is holding your mind and your brain. You got to make sure that thing's healthy. So I love to hear that answer. All right. So the next question we like to ask is, what is a partnership or a connection that would really help you outside of just money? Obviously, everybody would oh, yeah, just give me $1 million. But outside of money, is there a partnership or connection that would really help you?
Well, things that because I am kind of into the holistic thing, I'm always looking at partnerships for people who have that holistic approach that can bring something. I'm not massive on supplements, but there are certain things that people can do, medicinal mushrooms or, even stuff like therapy, like you're offering, things where people can understand the holistic nature. So those kind of collaborations are the ones that I'm looking for. People who are kind of doing courses and things on gut brain where perhaps they're giving that, that kind of layman message that I need to be giving. So, yeah, right. I think there are a lot of collaborations in this field that would be hugely beneficial just to get people to understand that there are things they can do to regain their own sovereignty that you could maybe do in conjunction with products like these.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. My buddy Sam Womack, he runs Beam Hyperbarics down in Austin, but he has this thing that he created called Peace on Demand. And it's all these different technologies that he's pieced together that direct stimulation of up and down the vagus nerve, a vibrating chair, all sorts of these different things, face mask thing, all sorts of stuff. It'd be interesting to see, connect you guys potentially. He's definitely a holistic guy, and his Peace on Demand is something he's trying to operationalize a little bit more. So that could be an interesting connection. I'll have to join you guys on an email.
Totally now.
He's awesome. And it's strangely enough, like the craziest coincidence, Sam is the one who left you a question. He is the last person we interviewed. And so the question that Sam left you, he didn't know he was leaving it for you, but he just knew it was the next guest. But the question he asked is, what would your life look like and who would you be if you gave the same amount of self-care and love to yourself that you give to others?
Oh, yeah, that's a bit of a heart-wrenching one, isn't it? I mean, it is always easier to give to others. And I do have a tendency to think that, I can cope better. So therefore it's easier. So I know I do have a bit of that. But actually, I have a lot of friends around me who are clued up to that and who do kind of nudge me in that direction and who do make a fuss of me and kind of encourage me to kind of take breaks. Weirdly enough, I was just kind of getting ready to come on and speak to you, and I had a friend message me say, "Oh, you're in Santa Cruz. I hope that you are making time for the things you love. I know that you love the redwoods. I hope you're doing it for yourself." So I have a lot of people nudging me. So I like to think that I am kind of living that, and my life wouldn't be too much different, that I'm not I think the work takes over a bit, but, I have a goal for that. So hopefully I'm not too far off the person I would be if I put that amount of effort in.
Let's hope not. Let's pretend that you did go hang out with the redwoods. You worked a little bit less. Like, what would that mean for you? What would it look like? What would that be? What would the experience be like for you?
I suppose I would be. I mean, there is a fair amount of stress from kind of working a lot. Certainly my suffering, so maybe my physical health, I've noticed lately that, I can't see as well without my glasses. So I think certain things like that, definitely, that's just one physical indicator of health. So I think certainly I have given up a little bit of my own health in order to run this company. So I think if I was off more in the redwoods, probably my health would be better. But, like at the moment, I'm kind of at a reasonable health. But yes,
no judgment here.
It's always your health that suffers, isn't it, when you kind of don't put yourself first?
Yep. Yeah, I specialize working with anxious achievers, and so I get to hear all of this kind of stuff all the time. So I love it. There's no judgment here. I'm the same way. I do the same thing. So it's all for good reason. All right, so it's your turn. You get to ask a question now. So what's a question we should ask the next company or the next founder for that you'd like to leave?
Okay, so it's a question for a founder. Well, I've been pondering what if I should be spending more time kind of meditating and really trying to get behind the nature of reality and consciousness, because like you say, that's something I think about a lot. So how much time does my next person spend thinking about, why are we actually here? And if they have spent any time thinking about it, what have they actually come up with on that level? What have they come up with on that spiritual side of what is that kind of extra bit of life that we don't think about? And how much time do they spend thinking about it? Because I often wonder, are other people sitting thinking about this at night, or is this just, it's just a weird thing to ponder? But if more people were kind of pondering these questions, I wonder if we'd get a bit further with that science.
That's a very good question. I like that. Yeah, I can't wait. I wonder who's next. Like, I hope it's like somebody crazy or something that does think about this and has a really profound answer. That'd be so cool. I'll send it to you for sure if that's the case. So cool. Well, I appreciate you hopping on with us. I had a ton of fun. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with, or any place you'd like them to go? We'll put all the links to your website and social in the description, obviously, the book you referenced, all that stuff. But anything else you'd like them to know, or any place you'd like them to go?
No, I would just encourage people maybe to think a bit more about their light environment, full stop. Not just these therapies, which are brilliant therapies, but just what is your light environment like? Are you actually doing these things where you kind of monitor it, keeping an eye on it, like saying, not looking at your phones, getting exposure to sun, just to bring it to your consciousness, just to bring it to this and question, am I kind of maximizing light in my day?
Like, yeah. Beautiful. Am I maximizing light in my day? What a beautiful, the sun is beaming into my face right now. What a beautiful thing to think about. So cool. Well, appreciate you hopping on, and thank you everyone who's listening. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe on YouTube, and I'll see you next time, everyone. Peace.
Thank you, Cody.